a story and learn how to use the second conditional. I wish I could be an astronaut. If I worked as an astronaut, I would travel in a spaceship. If I traveled to space, I would see the stars and visit the moon. I would also learn about all the planets. If I knew about the planets, I would teach people about them on Earth. We use second conditional sentences to talk about unreal present or future conditions and effects.
Hello dear students, welcome to our English lesson today. Today we are going to roll up our sleeves and practice with second conditional. We usually use it in different ways and we can also have lots of fun with second conditional. Let's get started our English lesson today. Firstly, look at the objective of today's lesson. In today's lesson, you can express your imaginary and dream with second conditional. Firstly, I'm going to tell you what conditional is. Conditional sentences consist of two sentences. They are condition and the result. We also call them if clause and the main clause. Қазақша айтқанда, conditional бұл шартты бағыныңқы сөйлем болып есептелінеді. Яғни ол сөйлем шарттан және нәтижеден құралады. And now I'm going to mention that if is conjunction. And the purpose of conjunction is to join two sentences and two different clauses together. They are really connected. They rely on each other. Here, if clause contains a condition and the main clause contains the result. If this happens, then that happens. Now, let's overview when we usually use the second conditional. We usually use the second conditional in a few ways. Firstly, to imagine that our lives or someone else's life is different. Secondly, to ask hypothetical questions. Thirdly, to give advice. And fourthly, you give the reason why you cannot do something.
Start with number one. We use the second conditional to talk about the things in the future that are unlikely or things that are impossible in the present. So, we use it to imagine and to dream that the present situation is different than it really is. Now, this could be because it's impossible now or because it's really unlikely to become real in the future. Not completely impossible, but unlikely. Біз шарт бағыныңқы сөйлемнің екінші типін өздеріміздің орындалмайтын армандарымызды және қиялдарымызды айтуда пайдаланамыз. If this happened, then that would happen. For example, if I had enough money, I would buy a house. Егер де менде жеткілікті ақша болғанда, мен үйді сатып алған болар едім. If the present situation was different, then I would do that. Егер де қазіргі жағдай басқалай болғанда, мен солай істеген болар едім. If I won the lottery, I would buy a house. Егер де мен лотереядан жеңгенімде, мен үйді сатып алған болар едім. Now, this is an unlikely event in the future, right? Because it's unlikely. I'm gonna win the lottery. Possible, but unlikely. Before we keep going with the other ways to use the second conditional, let's spend a little bit of time focusing on what it looks like. Conditional sentences all have an if clause and a main clause, which is sometimes also called the result clause because it can only happen if the if clause occurs. It's a condition, right? If this happens, then that happens. Now, what exactly makes a conditional sentence a second conditional? So, the second conditional uses a past simple verb in if clause and then would followed by the infinitive verb in the main clause. Шарт бағыныңқы сөйлемнің шарт сөйлемі өткен шақта қолданылады, ал бас сөйлем would-пенен келеді. For example, if she lived in London, she would have English friends. Егер де ол Лондонда жасағанда, оның ағылшын достары болар еді. Бұл жерде if she lived етіп lived өткен шақта келіп тұр, ал біздің бас сөйлеміміз would-пенен бірге келіп тұр. She would have English friends. Hypothetical questions. To ask someone to imagine what they would do in a different situation. So these situations are not real, but it's kind of fun to ask these types of questions. It really helps to conversation going sometimes. Гипотетикалық сұрақтар бұл адамдардың өздерінің басқа жағдайларда не істеген болатынын қиялдау мақсатында қолданылады. For example, What would you do if you quit your job? Егер сен жұмысыңнан шығатын болғаныңда не істеген болар едің? If you won $1 million, would you travel the world? Егер де сен де $1 миллион жеңіп алғаныңда дүние жүзін саяхаттаған болар ма едің? If you only had one day in Singapore, what would you do? Егер де сенде Сингапурда тек қана бір-ақ күнің болғанда не істеген болар едің? To give advice, we can use a second conditional to give advice, and if you think about it, when someone asks you for advice, you usually try to imagine what you would do in their situation and share that with them. Және де шарт бағыныңқы сөйлемнің екінші типін біз адамдарға кеңес беру мақсатында қолданамыз. For example, if I were you, I would talk to my boss before I quit my job. Мен сенің орныңда болғанымда, жұмыстан шықпастан бұрын бастығыммен сөйлескен болар едім. If I were her, I would break up with him. Мен оның орнында болғанымда, онымен қарым-қатынасты үзген болар едім. Now, if you are wondering why in both of those examples I was using were with subject I, I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. You can use the second conditional to give reasons why you cannot do something. You have probably already noticed that English speakers are usually quite polite to each other. Instead of just saying no, we often try and soften our responses by explaining why we cannot do something, and sometimes you might just want to explain a situation a little more. So the second conditional can really help you to do this. Және де біз шарт бағыныңқы сөйлемнің екінші типін бір нәрсені не үшін істей алмайтын себебімізді түсіндіру мақсатында қолданамыз. For example, if I had the money, I would lend it to you. Егер де менде ақша болғанда, мен саған оны қарызға берген болар едім. I don't have to explain myself any further here. This sentence already explains that I don't have any money, so I can't help. But it suggests that maybe you want to, that maybe you would if you could. Second, if I wasn't so busy, I would invite you over for dinner. Егер де мен қолым бос болғанда, мен сені кешкі асқа шақырған болар едім. But I'm really busy, so I can't invite you over. One of the most interesting parts about the second conditional is that it breaks some standard be verb grammar rules. We can actually use were instead of was with I, he, she, and it. Both of them are grammatically correct, but I guess were is a little more formal. Alright, so we would use it in more formal situations. If I was you, I would break up with him. If I were you, I would break up with him. Now it's time to do this task. Open the brackets and put the verbs into second conditional tenses. Қазір тапсырма орындайсыздар, жақшаларды ашып, етістіктерді шарт бағыныңқы сөйлемнің екінші типіндағы шақтарға қойып шығасыздар. You have only 1 minute to answer. If she apologized to me, I would forgive her. If I saw a spider, I would scream. If you were 18 years old, you would drive a car. Демек бұл жерде шарт бағыныңқы сөйлеміміз apologized, saw, were еді past simple'да, ал біздің бас сөйлеміміз would forgive, would scream, would drive етіп future simple in the past'та қолданылған.
And now open your books page number 37 and do exercise number 2 and 5. In exercise number 2, you must choose the correct tense. And in exercise number 5, open brackets and put the verbs into correct second conditional tenses.